The tweak to the regulations, travelers to South Africa will need to be vaccinated or produce a negative COVID-19 test. The president says all unvaccinated arrivals will be offered the vaccine for free.
Travelers entering South Africa will need to show proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test not older than 72 hours. All unvaccinated travelers entering the country who want to be vaccinated will be offered a vaccination. These measures will take effect from tomorrow, Wednesday, the 23rd of March, 2022, once the new regulations are gazetted.
That seems like a good point for us to speak to our next guest. Let's get reaction from the Tourism Business Council of South Africa CEO, Tshifhiwa, Tshivhengwa, who joins me now to have that conversation. So I think that the key regulation and tweak that came in as far as your sector is concerned, Mr. Tshivhengwa, has to do with the requirement for travelers entering South Africa to show proof of vaccination, which suffices starting from tomorrow, or if there's no proof of vaccination, to actually have a negative PCR test that is not older than 72 hours. And of course, that offer for those who are unvaccinated to be vaccinated. What is the import and the meaning of these tweaks that have been announced for your sector?
Well, I think this is a very critical announcement for our sector. We have been talking to government for the past few months to allow fully vaccinated travelers into the country without requiring the PCR test. And the reason for that is, it is expensive to obtain. It makes the destination expensive, and there's a lot of money that's spent outside of the country, when people are doing vaccination and it's not spent here, and therefore we lose out. So we have been saying to the president that it absolutely makes sense that those that are fully vaccinated should be given privilege to travel to our country without the negative PCR test. And today, these announcements fulfill what we've been talking about for the past few months, and things that we've been lobbying for the past few months in terms of the recovery of the tourism sector. And I do believe this is going to go a long way because there's a lot of people who wants to travel to South Africa, but the hindrance of PCR, was there, and they could, or they were choosing other places to travel to. So it's very important. And other countries in our neighborhood, including Namibia and Botswana, have already done this. Kenya, which is a country that competes with us in terms of safaris, have done this. And many others in other parts of the world have done this. So I think that is significant for the tourism industry. The fact that this is announced, the fact that we're going ahead with it from tomorrow, it means that people can be able to travel to the country easily.
So just for context, what has been the situation until today? Has it been that regardless of your vaccination status and your ability to prove that you've been vaccinated, you were still required to present a negative PCR test not older than 72 hours?
Well, absolutely. That has been the status. And anyone, whether you're vaccinated or not, it didn't matter. You had to produce a negative PCR test. Now, what this have done is that, those that are vaccinated now have a privilege to come at any time and being able to, arrive at a destination, without requiring, the PCR test. And also for South Africans that are traveling out of the country, in the past, we required them to present a PCR test when they come back, even if you're fully vaccinated. What this means is that South Africans that travel out of the country, when they return back, they don't need to present a PCR test. Again, it's an issue of cost. It's an issue of, it's not easy to get a PCR test. It's also an issue of making sure that the destination remains priority for international travelers. So that's why for us, this is good news. In addition to this, we do believe that the news of reduction of social distancing is important for the conferencing industry. The increased capacity in terms of the 50% is important for the conferencing industry as well. And also people going back to stadium. It's important for sports tourism People do go around the country following their teams, and they stay inside our facilities. And it's important for us to make sure that we cater for those tourists. And it's important that we offer the best experience and the best hospitality for those that are traveling. So it's good news all around. And we do hope that we maintain this going forward. And the health regulations that have been published, we must look at those very carefully to make sure that we don't have a legislation that will stifle the growth of the tourism industry.
In fact, you take me in a different direction. I was going to ask you a different question, but now that you've gone there and you've talked about these requirements, these proposed regulations in terms of the National Health Act, on which the public has the opportunity to comment until at least the 15th of April. What do you make of them? A number of them have to do with requirements for travel. I saw there, for instance, the requirements around screening for people who are about to board planes domestically, let alone internationally. I saw, of course, also that whole requirement that is now reflected in what the President has announced this evening around proof of vaccination. But I also continued, as I was reading, I also saw requirements that also mentioned the possibility of someone arriving in South Africa and not meeting some of these requirements and, perhaps testing and requiring to be quarantined and self-isolating, etc. As a package of proposed regulations, what do you believe will be the impact on the tourism sector?
Well, what we need to make sure of is that whatever we do in terms of this regulation does not have an unintended consequences. More often than not, when we put out regulation, they end up harming the industry, or we end up realizing later that whatever we have put together or enacted, as much as it may make sense now, it may not be easy to remove, in the near future. So we've got to be very careful. We've got to read this very carefully. We've got to make sure that it's progressive. We've got to make sure that, because the situation is fluid, we're able to move with the situation, we're able to change with the situation, and we're able to live with COVID. So we just have to make sure that we are flexible enough not to stifle the growth of the economy. So it's very important that we cast a fresh eye on this regulation and we look at them differently to what we've done before, because we are putting a permanent solution for now to manage COVID. And what if things change for the better? How are we going to move around that? What if things change for the worse? How are we going to move around that? So we have to be very careful. So for us as an industry, we want to make sure that we are not stifled. We can keep growing. We can keep hiring more people. Tourists can flow into the country. Domestic travel can continue. And we want to make sure that the conferences go on and many other aspects of hospitality continues. If we make sure that this is addressed in this regulation, it means that we're not going to have a start and stop situation. So we are looking at this very carefully, and we are spending our time on it to make sure that we read every line and we comment on every line possible to make sure that the industry is not stifled.
Lastly, how important is it that our steps are carefully calculated around, some of these regulations as far as they relate to the tourism industry, which is a key sector of our economy. At this very moment, in which, as you said earlier on, some of our competitor markets are starting to capitalize, how important is it that we make the right steps at the right time and do so efficiently going forward?
It is critical, and it is something that if we don't do it in that particular way that we put it, we don't gain a competitive advantage. It's the same thing as the removal of PCR test. Other countries did it last week, and we've been talking about this for the past 2 weeks to say we've got to move as fast as we can, because the 2 weeks that we don't move, it means that people are choosing to go to Kenya, they're choosing to go to Botswana, Namibia, and many other destinations. So it's very important that whatever we do, whatever regulation that we have, it's agile enough, and it can be changed quickly enough to respond to the market, changes or the pandemic changes. So it's very important that we do that timely, and we are calculated, and we protect the interest of our economy, and we make sure that tourism thrives. So for us, it's very, very important, and that's what we've been lobbying for many, many years, to say we need to do things in a very, very carefully, in a carefully crafted way, and we need to look at what's going on outside, and we need to make sure that we are competitive as a destination. So that is key for us.
Yeah, what with a new global campaign that we launched recently as a country in as far as tourism is concerned. Thank you for your insights this evening. That's Tshifhiwa Tshivhengwa, who is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, weighing in on some of the regulation tweaks that were announced by President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier on this evening.